Hello, everybody. Welcome into SportsDay Insiders presented by the Dallas Morning News. I am Kevin Sherrington, joined by my pals Evan Grant, and both of you guys are on the West Coast. Evan Grant and Joe Hoyt at training camp at Oxnard. Evan, where are you staying, Evan?
Joe's in an entirely different county, which is like a different state in California. I'm in Orange County at the Fullerton Marriott, where I have stayed for 29 years. They've named a suite after me here.
29 years? There's a hotel that's been around that long on the West Coast?
Yeah, that's right.
Wow.
Jerry Fraley introduced me to this place. It's close to an In-N-Out, which at that point in time was rare to get, and it's convenient to the ballpark. What more do you want?
Well, I don't know, something. Nice towels.
They have nice towels.
Okay.
They also have an air conditioner that will actually make the room too cold for me, which I didn't think was possible.
Wow. So there's the attraction right there.
That's it.
Joe,
now
how's
let's
everything
talk
going
about
on?
Joe and his palatial surroundings.
This is what we can tell you. The listeners can't see this, but we can. Joe, that looks like a nice joint y'all got there.
It's a nice Airbnb. We were checking out the fire pit the other day. We've got a hot tub. But yeah, Evan, you might as well be in Narnia. How far away you are from here, because LA traffic, man, it's a beast, and being on the other side. But it's been good out here. A lot of news, a lot of stuff to talk about.
I don't know. I will say this: there's a rumor going around, however, that as far away as Oxnard may be, Mike Ducey and Pat Doney are showing up down here because the Rangers are playing a big series. That's all I'm saying.
I might have to show up to a Rangers game. I can write a sidebar. That sounds fun. So I could do a little extra work there.
He's done a little Rangers work before.
Yeah.
Joe, there's always something going on with the Cowboys, even when there's not supposed to be anything going on, meaning that the owner is always interjecting himself into the situation. So just real briefly here, just give us the update. Micah Parsons still held hostage. Is what now? 46, whatever. I don't know.
Yeah, there's a guy on Twitter I follow who does a pay Micah Parsons counter every single day, and he's up to date like 100 since he started doing it. So yeah, the hold in, the hostage situation, as you mentioned, kind of keeps lingering. This is kind of been following the playbook of every single star negotiation now. At first Micah was pretty calm about it. Hey, me and Jerry are good. There was compliments. Now there's shots being sent across the bow. There's tension. Yesterday, there was a point where Micah Parsons was watching practice and kind of had his back turned as the Joneses kind of were slowly walking up onto the field, and he ended up kind of going to the other side of the field. I've seen him talking with Will McClay pretty demonstratively. I think this is a situation where there's lines in the sand at this point, and now we're just kind of waiting to see which side cracks. Stephen Jones said the other day, hey, if Micah wants to get a deal done, he's got to want to be paid, just like Jake Ferguson. Well, they're kind of different beasts when you're talking about $13 million a year and potentially somewhere upwards of $40, potentially $45 million a year, like Micah Parsons kind of wants. So there's lines in the sand, and we'll kind of see how the fallout happens from there.
Well, we know that the Cowboys will crack.
The sand is on the beach in Ventura County. That's where the lines in the sand are actually. But I have figured out the Micah Parsons thing.
Let's hear it.
I figured out every contract situation with the Cowboys in camp, and it literally dawned on me yesterday. I was walking into lunch, and there on the screen, I forget whether it was ESPN or NFL Network or Colin Cowherd, but there's a long segment about Micah and the contract, and Micah this and Micah that, and this is all just Jerry's marketing. Draw the stuff out and keep the drama going. There is no reason for this thing to be an issue. There was no reason for Dak's thing to be an issue, but Jerry gets attention to a team that may not be that interesting on the field all camp long with these contract situations. That's my newest theory.
So that just came to you, huh? After, I don't know, some of us have written that for years, but that
Kevin,
just now came to you.
You may have written it, but it's not interesting.
Evan, of course that's what it is. Jerry, when we talk about which side will cave in first, the Cowboys will cave in. It's not a matter of, I think, Joe, to me, the question has always been, yes, Jerry does draw these things out. Some of it is just to draw attention to the team. I do think, though, one of the things he was babbling about the other day was about we don't know what can happen with these guys. And I don't rule out the possibility that Jerry thinks that, what if, let's say, I don't know, the Bears decided that, hey, we'll give you 3 first-rounders and a couple of players for Micah Parsons. What do you think about that, Jerry? I don't think that in Jerry's mind, there's always a possibility of something happening. If I go ahead and give him the money, nothing's gonna come of this. But if I drag this thing out, it's good for publicity. It keeps us in the news cycle, and maybe something else will happen.
Yeah, maybe the one caveat I'll offer to this, though, is that I think that Jerry and Steven both believed that they had a deal done earlier in March. That they believe that, like, hey, we are good to go. All we have to do is just kind of get this thing across the finish line. We have all the terms kind of agreed to. And then I think the fact that, they believe that there hasn't been kind of a meeting from the other side's representation in terms of actually getting to that point. I think there's a little bit of frustration from the Joneses as well. I think that if you kind of look at the track record, again, we saw with Jake Ferguson, saw with Osa Odighizuwa, like they will pay guys if they're willing to kind of meet them at a deal that the Joneses like early. And to Evan's point, I think there is a lot of value with this marketing. I think if you kind of look at how much money it would cost to have 15 minutes on ESPN every single morning, the brand value is extremely high. So I think there is a little frustration, though, this time around about the fact that, hey, didn't we agree to this? And now you're kind of saying you want a little bit more as the market goes up. So that's kind of where that is with them.
I think that's I don't doubt that there's frustration. And it doesn't matter how many times it's happened before. It's only happened to Micah Parsons once, right? And so he can listen to what other people have said. He can listen to what CeeDee Lamb says or Dak Prescott says and take some counsel on that. But, it only happens to you once. And so I imagine he is frustrated. But what we do know about Jerry Jones is that he pays his stars. And one of the things that he said, just yesterday or the day before, was he said that Micah Parsons might be the most talented player we've ever had here. And I would say, yes, that's right. I think that Micah Parsons is certainly in the top 5 talents in Jerry's tenure with the Cowboys and probably the top 5 in the history of the organization. And so he doesn't let that kind of thing walk. He's not going to it's not going to end up with him saying that we have drawn our line and we are not going to cave in. Ultimately, Jerry will cave in just because of who Micah Parsons is and the kind of talent he represents, because that's always been his history. I can't imagine him changing that now. He knows what he's got. He knows what he has on hand there. So, Joe, let's go over now and talk about some things here. We want to talk about your 3 biggest surprises here at camp and your 3 biggest concerns. Let's start with the surprise. Let's start with the good news first. What are the 3 surprises? Well, let's say, first of all, these are good surprises. I guess before we get to that real quickly, which is say, unless Tyler Guyton figures in that, is his injury one of your surprises or concerns or not?
The injury and what they do after it is a concern, but it's funny, before the injury, I thought he would have been a surprise. I can talk about that right now really quick. Basically,
sure.
Tyler Guyton, if you look at what happened last year, this was a guy who kind of came in raw, not knowing what to do in the NFL. Didn't have a lot of experience, and it really showed. Then some injuries happened. It wasn't a good year for him. He kind of took ownership of that and said, hey, I want to change things this offseason. And to his credit, it showed. He changed his diet, changed his workout routine. He became very routine oriented, tried to really work on his mental side of things too. He talked about how much he prays and trying to be very neutral. And these things were showing in camp. I thought that, it's ironically, yesterday I thought was his best day. He had a bunch of good pass protection reps against Donovan Ezeraku, against Sam Williams, against some other guys. And he looked good. He was starting to look like the guy that you could depend on at left tackle. So that was going to be a surprise. And I guess I'll cheat here by then making this a concern now. Where did the Cowboys go from here at left tackle? I think that they have multiple options.
Is that allowed? Can he go from surprises to concerns in the middle of the list, or does he have to do all the surprises and then all the concerns?
Evan, be quiet and let Joe talk. Thank you. Go ahead, Joe.
I'm cheating a little bit for sure. This is kind of a double dip, but I do think it is concerning where you go now. He's out 4 to 6 weeks with a knee sprain, and they're calling it a fracture in there in one of the bones, which obviously can have a different meaning based on what it is. They're going to do some tests to really determine that length over the next few days, potentially maybe the next couple weeks to really see when he could be actually back. But you start looking at week one, and that's definitely in question. So where do they go? Do they move Tyler Smith to left tackle like he did his rookie year? I don't think they want to do that. I think that they believe Tyler Smith is a guy that is, they have high, lofty standards for the track he's already on, and they want to keep him on that track. Awesome Richards is someone I think that could definitely get a look at left tackle. They've been using him as a jumbo tight end recently with the first team, and he played right tackle with the second team. Right after Tyler Guyton's injury yesterday, I saw him working on left tackle pass pro sets with Tyler Smith getting in that extra work. He kind of, wink, wink, nudge, nudge that like, yeah, you got to be prepared for anything now. So the other two options are Nate Thomas and Akeem Adeniji. Akeem Adeniji played with right tackle. Nate Thomas, we didn't see it all during his rookie season, but he's earned a lot of compliments. Anyways, big question because for, behind Tyler Guyton, they don't have much experience. Some other surprises, unless you want to jump in.
No, go ahead.
Yeah.
One quick thing about that is that, yeah, that would be a real concern for me. And I got to tell you, this whole idea that, we can, as you said, there's not a lot of depth or experience there at left tackle. That's kind of an important position. It's the blind side of the quarterback. And so I get the idea that you want to leave Tyler Smith at left guard. But I think ultimately, if you go through camp here, and obviously he's going to miss, Guyton's going to miss the rest of camp at least, that if these guys don't impress you, then you got to consider the possibility of kicking, Tyler Smith over there to left tackle.
Yeah, I think you would have to. And that's a concern and something we're going to have to monitor moving forward. But some surprises, some good news. How about this? Kyer Elam, I think, the former first-round pick that they traded for a late-round pick and a pick swap from Buffalo. Everyone kind of said, whatever. Kyer was getting torched in that AFC Championship game when he got called upon against the Chiefs. We'll see what happens here. Kyer Elam's been fantastic, I thought. Kyler Elam has been consistent. He had a pass breakup every single day of minicamp and OTAs, and he has definitely kind of built that momentum and brought it over. He's got 2 interceptions so far in training camp, and both of which were not easy. You kind of look at interceptions with different. It's almost like sacks sometimes, where it's like, how valuable is it? He was making plays on those balls, and then he lifted a kid up from the sideline like Simba. So he's earned the nickname Rafiki a little bit early on here for that. But he's been really, really good. I think the Cowboys, in terms of a concerning area at corner, this is someone who has been a consistent thing for them, which I think is all they can ask for. Deron Bland's been out. He just returned yesterday, but didn't participate in team drills after they welcomed a child. So there's been a lot of questions. You've seen Izzy McQuamu, Kalen Carson, who's now out too for a little bit. You saw Troy Pride. You've seen Andrew Booth. A lot of questions. No Trayvon Diggs, no Savone Revel. Those are some questions, but Kyer Elam has been a constant and someone that I think that they can count on. And then Donovan Ezeraku, the second-round pick, I talked to him briefly. He looks the part. Their pass rush depth in general looks fantastic. Donovan Ezeraku, is someone, when you think of second-round picks, you kind of think, you hear height, weight, speed guy, you think of someone who's just going to rush past guys. He doesn't really have the refinement that other pass rushers have. Donovan Ezeraku has every tool in the toolbox when it comes to pass rushing moves, and he's been showing it. He looks great, and he looks kind of like the Robin, I think, to the Batman that is Micah Parsons that they've been really hoping for. Sam Williams looks good, so I think the pass rush looks really good. And then the biggest surprise for me, I don't know if running back is actually going to be that big of an issue, in terms of who is back there. We talked about Miles Sanders and Javonte Williams. Those are two guys that don't get more than what they're allowed to get, frankly, in terms of being running backs. They don't they don't get rushing yards over expected, right? Well, so far, the interior offensive line specifically has been really good. And maybe that's an indictment on the run defense, which is kind of one of the concerns, interior. But they've looked fantastic. They've had a lot of holes, whether it's Kevontae Turpin, Williams, or Sanders. There's a lot of room to run right there. So I'm curious to see how that goes.
Real quick here. So about Javonte Williams. So, the Broncos obviously weren't confident that he was going to return after a year with his knee injury a year later. And so the Cowboys were betting that he was, right? So does he look like he has a burst? Does he look like he has returned to the form that he had at his peak with the Broncos?
I wouldn't say that, to be honest. That's where I'm kind of saying, like, I don't know if it does matter who's back there right now because they're blocking so well. I'll be honest. I think Miles Sanders has looked better significantly than Javonte Williams so far. I think Devontae Turpin has looked significantly better than Javonte Williams as a running back right now. So I think that's one thing that is something to watch is who actually could emerge. I think Miles Sanders looks a little bit refreshed.
Are they you're saying that? Did I miss something here? Is Devontae Turpin running, getting the ball and running?
Yeah,
with it?
he's been used. Like, I don't think he would ever be RB1. Frankly, like, I think they like using him as a wide receiver. But for example, he had the first 2 carries yesterday in team drill. And this is a guy that, it's funny when you look at him, you're like, how could this guy withstand some of these hits? He's so small. And I've been kind of preaching for a while. This is a guy, despite his size, I think it's some way he runs and kind of the, force is mass times acceleration. And he definitely has the acceleration part of it. He can deliver some hits back there. He ran through Tyler Smith yesterday at one point. He knocked Tyler Smith to the ground. Tyler Smith doesn't end up on the ground very often. Devontae Turpin sent him flying. So I think that's an X factor for what they could do in that backfield.
So what does that mean for Jadon Blue? I would assume that would have been the role that he would have had as that kind of back if Devontae Turpin is getting those reps.
I think Jadon Blue is still with the twos. But he's looked good with the twos. But there's still work to be done. They have not had that barrier broken through yet. Him and Phil Maffa and Deuce Vaughn, when he's been healthy, he's got a hamstring thing right now. But Schottenheimer's like kind of the response that Jadon Blue has had since minicamp and OTAs, which I don't think went very well for him. But he's had a nice run so far with the twos. But there's still work to be done there.
Okay. All right. What are your concerns?
Yeah,
well, Tyler Guyton had the one. Tyler Guyton was number 1. Okay.
Tyler Guyton's 1. And then I think, 2 of them come back to 2 other draft picks, or frankly, 3 other draft picks if you look at them that they've had recently in the higher side. Let's start at wide receiver. We have George Pickens and we have CeeDee Lamb, who look really good, right? That combo looks awesome. There's belief that maybe Jalen Tolbert can, slide into wide receiver 3 and just that could be a good home for him as he's heading into a contract year. Jalen Tolbert's had a rough training camp so far, I think, to be honest. He had multiple drops over the last couple of days. One of those Kyrie Elam interceptions was Kyrie Elam kind of undercutting him pretty. It was a nice play by Elam, but, undercut him pretty easily, I thought, in a ball that could have been kind of a contested catch thing. Tolbert's got some work to do. And frankly, I think he's got to worry about Jonathan Mingo on his heels. Jonathan Mingo has been consistent, which is something that, you haven't been able to say in his NFL career. He's made a lot of catches. He's got a really good rapport with Joe Milton. I think that's a concern. So we'll see what happens with Jalen Tolbert. And we'll see if they carry 5 or 6 wide receivers. That's one note, too. The 6 receiver options have not really separated themselves or stood out. And then Mazi Smith, I think, has been really inconsistent. And this is someone, he's had a career of inconsistency. 3 defensive coordinators, 3 defensive line coaches. They've asked him to lose weight. They've asked him to gain weight. They've asked him to do all these things. I think that he hasn't, from just my view, I don't think it's been a good camp for him so far. Cooper Beebe, I think, has been having a field day moving him around. So that's one thing. And then, we're still kind of waiting to see a little bit more of Luke Schoonmaker now that Brevin Span-4 is out for a little while too he's going to miss a few weeks with an ankle injury. Curious to see if Schoonmaker can kind of rise to the challenge, but that's always been a concern too.
So the bottom line here, don't draft any more guys from Michigan in the first 2 rounds, right?
Yeah, right. And maybe South Alabama too. We'll see if Jalen can turn it around. But he definitely needs to kind of have a turnaround here in camp.
Yeah. So these are this is the interesting about the way this camp is run so far. Do you get the idea here that it got a little chippy there for a while, and Schottenheimer took the guys over and told them, hey, any more fights and you're done for the day, that kind of stuff. Does it seem like he's in charge of the camp?
Oh yeah, no doubt. They had him mic'd up. The other day for a whole practice. There's a lot of respect for the authenticity of Brian Schottenheimer amongst these players. And he's kind of created truly this compete everyday culture. And I know that's kind of, I think in journalism, we look for things, hey, don't just tell me about it, show it to me, right? And we see a lot of signs of this. They have competitions for literally everything. Jalen Tolbert was telling me that the wide receivers time themselves when they're drawing plays, and whoever gets it faster than the other one wins a point, and then those overall points go to a bigger, training camp competition that they're doing to try and see who can actually have the most points on the wide receiver room. The corners are tracking PBUs, they're tracking incompletions, they're tracking interceptions with points, they're tracking everything. They literally have competitions for the bag drill that they do, the energy bag drill, and the coaches, which one can have the better props than the other side, offense or defense. Like, these are things that they're competing on every day. I think Schottenheimer, authenticity is the word that everyone keeps using with him, and I think that that's had some command to it, because when he tells you when he's angry, and he can get angry, I think the players respect that.
Yeah, I guess that's the thing that, it's easy for a coach, and especially if you've been an assistant coach, to be the guy, the good guy, right? You're the good cop, and you get to play that. And now that you're the head coach, it's a different relationship, and I'm not always sure that players, automatically respect you for that, right? You got to earn that. And I would assume the fact that he'd been there for a couple of years, and so they knew him, and then there wasn't a real break-in period. But he's still the head coach now. I wonder, Joe, can you tell a difference from that standpoint between a Mike McCarthy training camp and a Schottenheimer training camp?
Yeah. I only saw one training camp with Mike McCarthy, and that was last year. And I don't think energy was something you would use to kind of describe a lame duck season with coaches all on 1-year deals. So, I mean, maybe it's not fair. Just the energy that I think Schottenheimer's brought has been different. I do think that the physicality, frankly, has been different. If you kind of look at what they're doing on defense, every single play their offense has to finish, right? They have to try and go to the end zone. That's not new. I think the one thing that's been unique is, and I don't know how their hands are not getting hurt by this, defenses are punching, like legitimately throwing haymakers at the ball every single chance they get. Like, I've seen fists hit shoulder pads that doesn't look easy. Like, I've seen fists to arms trying to break them down, where that would leave me with a bruise for 2 months if that happened to me. So they've been really physical, and I think that's kind of a testament to what Schottenheimer's trying to produce there too. I'm curious. They've had multiple injuries now, the last few days. They've had a lot of high energy team drills, a lot of guys on the ground when they're not supposed to be. I'm kind of curious to see if Schottenheimer has a shift there, or if he's going to try to persevere through that.
Yeah, that's not always when you're trying to introduce physicality and you have injuries, like a knee injury. To me, that's not a result of physical play necessarily. That's just a bad, a bad accident, right? Torque or something like that. But if you've got, other types of things showing, a guy throwing a punch like that, and he breaks a finger, breaks a wrist, whatever like that, then that's clearly what it's going to be. That would be something, that would be different about the Cowboys defense, though, right? Over the years, you wouldn't call this a physical defense. It's always been built on speed, predicated on quickness and speed, and getting to the ball carrier. Getting to the quarterback, that type of thing, but never a physicalness to it or physicality to it. Now, obviously, that will show up more against the running game, and so as you noted, we'll find out whether the success that this offensive line is having is because it's a good offensive line or because it's working against this defensive line in camp. So when we see some scrimmages, we'll know a little bit more about that, right?
Yeah, I think the joint practice with the Rams is going to be very telling.
Yeah. So give us the schedule on that, Joe. When does that start?
So that's the 5th. So that's coming up next week. So we'll have that joint practice. Then we'll have the first preseason game that weekend. So we're kind of accelerating towards find out mode. I think we're gonna learn a lot about these guys. I was so curious to see Tyler Guyton versus Jared Verse again, like last season, to kind of have a good benchmark. So that's kind of a bummer that we won't have that. But we're going to find out a lot about, especially I think, and I'm curious to see how vanilla Schottenheimer is with play calling in these preseason games, because I kind of want to get a sense for what his offense is actually going to be. He keeps talking about how they want to run the ball and how they, don't worry about that. We're going to run the ball. But, when I see Pickens and CeeDee Lamb out there, part of me thinks they're going to push it downfield. So I'm curious to see more about that. There's a lot to find out and more news to come.
Yeah, I could see that situation where it's okay to run the ball and throw the ball deep too, and those are good things. That sets that up, the deep pass, when you do that. It's all the stuff underneath. You're relying on that instead of your running game that makes a difference. Joe, it's great to hear all that news from you. You did a great job of summing up a lot of stuff. I know Evan was concerned about getting that many topics into one segment, but we did it. You did it, and we appreciate that. And the best part about all of it was that Evan just had to sit there and be quiet. I really enjoyed that part.
I was going to say after you told him to let me go, I was waiting for more Evan cut-ins, but he
I've been
snapped
told that my humorous interjections are not needed, and so
Yeah.
I will just continue to pout for a while.
Well, if they were humorous, we'd allow them, but they're just interjections. So that's the difference. Thanks, Joe. We appreciate it, man. We'll see you next time. Okay.
Yes.
There goes Joe. Before we get to the Rangers segment, just to throw this in here because we're just going to have basically the two segments. But the Mavericks hired a president of operations, Ethan Casson, who was previously with the Minnesota Timberwolves, has a long time relationship, or at least has worked with Rick Welts, the CEO of the Mavericks. So they are adding layer upon layer. Now, what used to be a mom and pop organization, now the Mavericks have got all kinds of people there in the front office. And this is the way that the Dumont family, or the Adelson family, and Patrick Dumont are going to run things, I guess, which is fine with me. If they know what they're doing, they're very intent on building themselves a nice new arena, and they'd like to have a casino to go with it, but they're not talking about that anymore.
Once again, demonstrating how irreplaceable Mark Cuban was to the operation of the Mavericks.
Right, he could do it all. He was a one-man band. He did everything. Then he was on Shark Tank too. I mean, it's just like, what more could you want the guy to do?
Wish I had his energy.
So Evan, so the first night on the West Coast, when you returned to cover the team, of course the team lost, and then even Jacob deGrom had a bad game. You intimated that perhaps he was tipping pitches to the Angels in their 6-4 loss. Do you think there might be anything to that?
I don't know. I think there's a ton of theories you could go by, and I picked the stupidest one when I was talking to deGrom after the game, just about, whether or not the innings are catching up to him, but his velocity was fine. It's hard for me to tell what were tipped pitches versus what were just mistakes, because the first home run that he gave up to the number 9 hitter, Kevin Newman, was, for lack of a better term, a lazy slider. I mean, it was a slider just in the middle of the zone. And that's, as long as the guy is aware of the slider, I mean, that's a pitch he's not going to miss. But there were other pitches that they laid off, and they did have 3 hits on the sliders. And they have had more balls in play against the slider in his 2 starts against them than they've had swings and misses on the slider. So those are all interesting facts. And Taylor Ward was apparently asked by the LA writers after the game about deGrom. Ward had homered, and Ward just kind of gave him a sly smile. So maybe there is something there, or maybe it's the fact that, the Angels saw him 3 weeks ago and he's still fresh in their minds. But the numbers are really strange against the Angels for him.
Well, the good thing is that, if the Rangers do make the playoffs, they're not playing the Angels. So that might be okay. All right, let's look at things now as they stand. As we're recording this on Tuesday morning, so there's 2 days left till the trade deadline at this point. The Rangers have not made a move. We certainly expect them to make one for a reliever, don't we, Evan?
Yeah, I mean, I do. I don't think they're going to play at the absolute top of the reliever market, and the top of the reliever market has been thinned out with the injury to Felix Bautista, and the ineligibility now of Emmanuel Clase due to a betting investigation.
Let me just say something about that real quick. And obviously, these are, I guess,
it's okay for you to interrupt. Okay for you to interrupt.
I'm not interrupting with a silly, stupid remark. I'm interrupting with an observation about Emmanuel Clase and the fact that, I guess these are prop bets he was making. I saw several times on Twitter, people on an 0-0 pitches throwing pitches way out of the strike zone, spiking balls 10 feet short of the plate, throwing them 3 feet wide, where there was no possibility of them being called strikes.
Right.
And I guess people are looking at this kind of thing as what he might be doing.
Yeah, who would think that prop bets on what the first pitch is would be a bad idea? But this is what Major League Baseball signed up for, and you're going to have any number of these scandals erupt as we continue to go forward. I don't know what the solution is, but this is going to be a real issue, and it's just going to be like the steroid situation that. Technology got better with the medicines or with the drugs, and players have continued to try and stay ahead of the game. And so, if there are going to be guys out there who will try and stay ahead of the game to make a little bit extra money.
Is this part of the reason why, it wasn't because of betting, but it was because of there was a PED thing with Clase as well, wasn't there? Was there not?
A what?
A PED issue with Clase at one point? Didn't he have to sit out a while? Wasn't there an issue of some sort?
Listen, so many former Rangers have been PED connected. It's hard for me to keep up.
Yeah, I think there was. But at any rate, okay, that's another reliever off the market. So as you were noting, they won't play at the top of the market, but that's the one good thing about this market is that there are a lot of relievers available, and they should be able to get one.
Yeah, there are, but I, at the top of the market now, I think you've got guys like David Bednar, who's drawn interest from the Rangers and from everybody that is looking for a reliever. You've got Johan Duran from Minnesota, who has drawn interest and maybe, priced too high for a lot of teams. But these two losses to the market, I think, compress the market a little bit and have added another layer of complication to it. And so I think that where the Rangers are probably playing, it's going to come down to Thursday at some point in time. Going to come down to the last day, and it's going to have to wait until a couple of these guys at least move, unless the Rangers decide to really step up and get aggressive. And, Kevin, my issue with that is I don't know that the Rangers have the players to go out and be aggressive for these guys. And look, when you're talking about relievers, it's one thing if we're talking about a controllable reliever. David Bednar would have another year of control. But if you're talking about a rental reliever, if you're talking about Raisel Iglesias or Kevin Finnegan, you're talking about a rental player. Or what are you going to give up for 2 months of a rental reliever? So that is something that the Rangers will have to sort through too.
Well, that thing about 2 months of a rental reliever, though, that's at least cheaper than not only from the financial standpoint, it might fit inside that little skinny.
Right, because the last time the Rangers went for a rental reliever for 4 months, it cost them a Cy Young candidate. So
yeah, well, Cole Reagans has had trouble this year, so maybe the Rangers could foresee that he was going to have physical issues.
Listen, the long term success of Cole Reagans is a great get for Kansas City, but it's never going to trump the Rangers winning a World Series for the first time with Aroldis Chapman.
It is not.
And
no, it is not.
We don't need to agree.
Yeah. So, do you feel like that there's any possibility that they could add a bat? Has Ray Davis gone for his wallet here, or is that out of the question now?
I mean, I think there might be some interest in a bat, and maybe there's the first 2 games back for Jock Peterson have not looked good at all. But if there was interest in a bat, it was probably in a right-handed bat, and Peterson is a left-handed bat. I just think, Kevin, when you boil all this down, the Rangers unless the Rangers have changed tactics considerably, and by that I mean that they are willing to now go over 241, which means if they go over 241, then in all likelihood they are not going to come anywhere close to the threshold next year. Okay. If they go over that, then maybe they add a bat. If they don't go over it, for me, it's hard for me to see how they add a bat without moving other money. There's just not very much money available there. There's about $2 million that you could add to payroll. And I don't know that the Rangers have the capital available to basically get other teams to buy their prospects.
What about you had mentioned before Tyler Mahle, maybe, dumping that contract and enabling you to do something. How much is Tyler making this year?
Well, I mean, the math. Here's the math, right? Tyler Mahle and Raisel Iglesias are both making the same amount of money. So if you decided that you're okay in the starting rotation, and you could get the Braves to take Iglesias on to make that money wash, but then you'd probably have to pay with yet a second prospect, a prospect, and then another prospect on top of that. That might work. I just don't know, again, what prospects the Rangers would be able to give up. Outside of Sebastian Walcott, you have Alejandro Osuna and you have Malcolm Moore, and then you've got some nice pitchers, but I'm not going to say that there's any pitchers right now that are overwhelming. And so the system's not very deep in sexy talent at this moment.
Well, and that's more the reason just to trade them off. I say, take what you want.
The
I'll
problem
put
with
Walcott
that
in
is
a closet, and then you say, have anybody else you want.
Yeah, the problem with that is getting somebody to say, okay, well, you don't have great talent, but we'll just take more of it.
That's right. When I was growing up in Houston, that's the kind of trades we would make when I was a kid. What if we just traded all of the relievers for one guy? Just say, here, you can have 6 guys for one guy.
I mean, I will just say this. Look, I think we both know Chris Young well enough to know that the worst place for him to have been would have been in the middle. I think he's become convinced that he wants to make this team better. I don't know if he thinks this team is a World Series team or not. He believes in this team, but I think he's convinced that he wants to make this team better, and he will take some steps to try and make it better. I just think that the Rangers are probably in this relief market, which has to be their first priority for me. They are still going to be impacted by other forces rather than them being able to go out like they did in 2023 and say, we want Max Scherzer. We're going to go get Max Scherzer.
Yeah. All right. Let's talk about the lineup and what's happened here in the last couple of weeks in this span where they played their best baseball of the entire season without question. One of the things that had been advanced before was that as Corey Seager goes, so goes the Rangers. Well, he is hitting much better now than he has been. But in a couple of those games in the last series, he wasn't particularly doing that great. But the team was still scoring runs. We were seeing more players involved, guys taking more pitches, taking advantage of at bats, more things happening on the field than we've seen in a while. And I think that, of course, this is kind of what Chris Young has said all along, right? Is that this is the team that we thought we had assembled. These are the guys. And the funny thing about all that is the 2 guys that they added, they were supposed to really do something. Berger's not even playing. And Jock Peterson, that first swing he took, which was a ball right down the center of the plate. And he, of course, he has a little bit of an odd swing to me anyway. He's got he's a big guy anyway, and he's got a big body shift, and it's like he just pulls his whole body through the pitch. It's a little bit like you see in some Japanese hitters where they kind of take that and twist their whole body around when they're swinging. But boy, it did not look good. And
no,
I'm wondering,
the swings have not looked good, and the at bat yesterday or Monday, when he came up, I believe after the 2-run error with 2 men on base, it was just you go back and you look at the pitches and what he did with them, it just is very, very confusing. I actually asked somebody, I showed somebody the pitch location. I said, can you explain this at bat to me? And at the very end, he took pitch 6 of a 7 pitch at bat up and away for ball 3 to get to a full count. and then the same exact pitch in virtually the same exact location, he swung at and missed. And so I don't understand. Like, you took that pitch. Why did you swing at this very next pitch in the same location when that would have gotten you the bag?
Yeah, it's not good. It's not a good approach. And of course, look, the guy's been out for like what 2 months. So I get it. He's rusty coming back, and this is going to be difficult. But this is not a good time to have to be trying to bring Jock Peterson along either.
Yeah, I mean, again, this is some of the situation that the Rangers put themselves in, right? They put themselves so far back, and they had to try and win as many games as possible, and they needed to know where they stood. And so they brought Jock Peterson back. In my mind, I feel like they brought him back a little bit early. 2 games after missing 2 months and really not having a good first 2 months seemed to me a little bit rushed. They put him into the middle of the lineup in the number 5 spot, which I understand Bruce Bochy wants to break up the right-handers, sprinkle some lefties in there. Evan Carter hasn't hit great in July, so he wanted to drop Jock in there and maybe thought that with the guys in the middle of the order playing well, it would help Jock heat up a little bit. But it's looked a little bit like a rush job, and he doesn't look like he's. I didn't expect him to be ready, but he hasn't gotten the ball out of the infield in his first 8 at bats, and some of the swings have really looked just not. I hate saying this, but they've looked not major league ready at this point.
Yeah, I don't think so either. But to the point we were making originally about the offense coming around a little bit, I'm not as. Yes, I would like to see them add a bat here at the deadline. I think anytime you're in a situation like this, and you think you're on the verge of being pretty good, you need to go. When I say all, you don't go all in, but you do a little bit more than what you need to do. You don't just say, oh, we're going to count on these guys to carry us. Well, if you're in a position where you're not really sure how well you can do, then that's okay to have that kind of outlook. But when you've had the kind of starting pitching the Rangers have had this year, when you had the bullpen do a pretty good job, and if you could add a piece of the bullpen, that could really be something. And the offense is starting to come around, but to me, if you really want, knowing Chris Young, as you said, like we do, it seems to me he would really like to add a bat at this point. If nothing for no other reason than just to kind of like put you over the top, kind of almost like doubling down here.
Where are you going to put that bat? Is that going to be your DH?
Yeah, that's going to be my DH. I could do a DH. I could do a platoon at first base with Berger. I don't. Either way,
Well, you're gonna.
What else?
When Berger comes back, you're going to be playing Josh Smith at first base, pretty much against all the right-handers. I would think. I would think you're going to have a platoon at first base.
Yeah, already just those two.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or you could go. You could play Berger every day and play or play Berger and Josh Smith every day, and one of them DHs. The question is, they haven't gotten the performance they'd like, but where exactly are you going to put that bat?
Well, I mean, Berger hasn't given you anything either.
So no, he hasn't. I acknowledge that, but
that's the thing. Yeah, if I thought that Jake Berger was going to hit like he's supposed to, well, then no, everything's fine. Right. It's fine just as it is. But as you said, we're seeing again from the same thing from Evan Carter that hits pretty well for a while, and then he kind of goes into a slump. So you got a lot of that on this team, right?
Yeah, there's not a lot of hitters.
They're streaky hitters. There's not a lot of guys who are very consistent. I mean, I think we can just rule out Eugenio Suarez, can't we? I mean, the Rangers are not making a deal for somebody like that.
I don't think so. Again, I don't see them having the capital, and this week I hate to rule anything out, but I don't see the Rangers being a huge player in Eugenio Suarez.
Yeah. Now, see, that's a difference.
If they were to add, let me put it this way, Kevin. If they were to add a bat, I think it's going to be a complimentary bat, and I'm not sure exactly who that is.
Well, it would have been great to me. Josh Naylor would have been perfect. To me, Josh Naylor is the perfect guy for this lineup. A guy who draws a lot of walks, doesn't strike out very much, makes contact. This is the kind of guy the Rangers needed, in my mind. And I don't know that what the Mariners gave up, and I'm sure what the Mariners gave up was better probably than what the Rangers could have done. But I would love to have seen that bat in the lineup.
Yeah, I mean, look, the Mariners are going to be aggressive, and they were in getting Naylor, and the Rangers, at that point in time, still weren't sure how aggressive they could be. That's the difference, man.
So we don't know what the Astros are going to do either. They are supposedly in talks about Suarez as well because Paredes is hurt, I guess, and going to be out for a little while. It doesn't seem like an Astros kind of move to me, though. Arenado, they tried to get him in the offseason, and the Cardinals are apparently offering him up again. I don't think Arenado's a good move. I think his numbers offensive numbers have been in decline. He's still a really good third baseman, but I don't know what you're adding, and for that money he's making, that's not a good move for anybody at this point anyway. So there's not a lot of bats out there that are difference makers, and so if you're going to do something, I get it. If this guy's not going to be a difference maker like Suarez is, then you go over the threshold for a guy that may not do anything for you. I mean, it's not going to, like, as I said, he's not going to be a difference maker. Then what's the point?
Right.
So,
I mean, yeah, I don't think you make trades just to make trades. You make trades to make this team better.
oh, thanks for that insight. That was really good.
Well, it comes down to who's going to move the needle, Kevin.
Yeah. Who would move the needle for you besides Suarez?
I don't know. I don't have a strong feeling here because I focus so much on the bullpen. I haven't thought about the offense. I've kind of figured, the Rangers made their moves in the offseason, and it was going to be up to Berger and Peterson to prove in the second half that they weren't as bad as they played in the first half.
Yeah, good luck with that. And who knows with Berger? I don't know what he's going to do when he comes back. He was hitting better before he got hurt again. He's certainly been a better option than Peterson has been. I just don't see how much longer you can run Jock out there. That doesn't look.
Yeah, I mean it's difficult right now. It's really difficult to watch. Let me just go back on Naylor for a second here now. Naylor's a rental. He's got about $3 million left in salary, 3.5 probably at this point. And A, I don't know that the Rangers have the pieces to give up for a rental. B, the money would put them over the tax threshold. So for the Rangers, somebody like Josh Naylor would have been either the only move they could have made or too much in terms of salary. And so I go back to this needle that Chris Young has got to try and thread, and it is a very narrow field that he's going to be able to pick from, and I really think that's why it comes down to the Rangers being able to make one singular addition. And I really do feel like, as poor as the offense has played for most of the season, and as well as the bullpen has pitched, I think that bullpen needs reinforcements, and I think it needs a power arm somewhere.
Yeah, I understand that. I do think it needs a power arm, and that's probably the thing to do, and just kind of and just try to win games the way they've won them all year long, or the ones they have won. It's not like they've been beating people to death. So,
and I guess you've got to believe that the data all is ugly, but you've got to believe that Jock Peterson is not going to put up the worst batting average in the last 100 years in baseball history. You just got to that. I don't think that can physically happen, but maybe it will.
Somebody has to put it up.
I mean, nobody's hit lower than 135, and he's sitting there 12 points below that. He's got to ramp it up to get there.
Oh man. Oh man. All right, that's going to do it for our podcast this week. We thank you for coming and sitting in with us and listening. We hope you'll come back next week. I just want to say one quick thing before we get out of here. This podcast is not, we don't have video of it, and so y'all didn't have to deal with Evan taking off his glasses and putting them back on, and they're kind of like all whoppy jawed up at the top.
They're cattywampus, as my friend
cattywampus.
said.
And I'm trying to have a thought here, get some thoughts, and I'm looking at Evan, and it's like a crazy man sitting across from me. So
yeah, it's the little screw in the hinge is kind of going, and I realized that after I got on the plane. I'm like, do I go buy another pair of readers, or do I just make it through this trip with these wompy glasses?
I think that the screw being off is right up your alley. You're a little screwy. That's okay. All right. That's going to do it for this week. From everybody in here to everybody out there, thanks. And see you next time.